friends. I'm your host, Dr. Dave Layton, and thank you for joining me in our journey to hope. It is my desire through this podcast to bring you information about how to discover, sustain, or perhaps regain hope.
Well, hello, friends. This is the third part of my series on the role of grandfathers in sustaining hope in their grandchildren. My guest for this episode is Dr. Steve Wages. Steve is with the Cloverdale Center for Youth and Family at Faulkner University here in Montgomery, Alabama. He's been a guest before, and I had the honor of speaking with him in episode 95, and I encourage you to go back and listen to that episode. We discussed how families support hope in their members as well as in society. Well, hello, Steve.
Hello, good to see you again, Dave. Looking forward to this conversation about grandfathers.
Well, when I was starting to put it together, your name was at the top of the list.
Well, thank you for that.
Both as a grandfather, but also professionally as you work with Cloverdale. Well, we know that grandparents have a vital part in the family structure. It's been that way, I guess, throughout history. And so I'd like to explore how grandfathers particularly, I can associate with grandfathers. Grandmothers, that may be another whole episode. But we help support our families in so many ways. And I had a guest previously that called it a complementary role. And I really like that. That was a great term, complementary role. Okay, well, let's begin by, how did you feel when you first heard you were going to be a grandfather?
Hey, I remember that moment. My son and daughter-in-law had been on vacation to California, and they came back to Texas and immediately called us and said, "Hey, can we come over this weekend?" And I looked at Wanda after our conversation on the phone, and I said, something's up. If they've been traveling to California and they want to get home and then immediately travel to come see us.
Your grandfather radar was working.
Something's up. And so we were I remember sitting on the sofa, and we were looking at their vacation pictures. And we were flipping pages, and then we flipped this page, and it said, "Welcome to the Grandparents Club of America."
Oh, wow.
And that was how they told us we were going to become grandparents for the first time. And you asked, well, how did you feel? I believe my response at that time was to tear up and kind of begin to cry a bit. But I distinctly remember, Dave, when my first grandchild was born and how that felt. I remember they took Caleb, who recently graduated from high school, and handed him to me.
Okay.
And I immediately just started crying.
It is amazing.
It was just I just started crying, and I'm like, why was it so emotional? And I think part of it was the innocence of that moment.
Okay.
Little Caleb was... Yeah. I mean, this is God's innocence.
I've heard people say God's giving me a second chance to overcome all those mistakes I might have made.
Yes, I think the other part of me crying in that moment was, I believe I was literally looking at the personification of my legacy. Okay. Was in this grandchild.
Yeah.
That's our, we might be successful in our work, but it's really our children and our grandchildren that we leave to the world. And
I'm glad you said that, because a little bit later I want to discuss something about legacy, because that is such an incredible part of it.
Absolutely.
Okay, good. All right. It's a given that our role, whether parent or grandparent, is important, but what do you see as far as your most important role as a grandfather?
Yeah, you asked that question in a way that I can only get one answer. It's like the most important role. What would it be? And if I only got one answer, I think I would go to Deuteronomy 4:9.
Okay.
Listen to this. Only be careful and watch yourselves closely so that you do not forget the things your eyes have seen or let them slip from your heart as long as you live. Teach them to your children and to their children after them. Teach them to your children and to your grandchildren. So Dave, help me out here. For your audience, I want to make a little list of what had their eyes seen that they would tell their children. Matter of fact, over in Psalms, it says, chapter 71, verse 18 says, even when I am old and gray, do not forsake me, O God, till I declare your power to the next generation. Yep. It's like, hey, what is it we declare? He says, tell them, declare what you have seen. So one thing would be just that verse there. They had seen the power of God. Mm-hmm. They'd seen the seas parted.
You know, you were talking when I asked you how you felt. I think the moment we hold our grandchildren, we do see the power of God continuing through that child. So I think that's a very insightful psalm. There's more. There's other verses of Scripture that give us a very important role.
Yes, absolutely. I want to stay with this thought, though. What would you declare to your children and your children's children? This is what we have seen. We've seen the power of God. They saw the provision of God, the manna coming from heaven. Tell it to your children and your grandchildren, the provision of God. They saw God's faithfulness. They saw the deliverance of God. Can we tell our children and our grandchildren how God has delivered us at times in our lives? They witnessed the forgiveness of God, the grace of God. Is that something we should declare and teach to our children's children? They saw the holiness of God, and one that I really like, they saw a God of transformation.
Okay.
As he rebuilt the nation of Israel, it says God can transform. And so we become a witness. I think that's what Deuteronomy is saying. You become God's witness. You declare to your children and your children's children what you have seen, what you have witnessed from God.
Okay, you and I have not witnessed some of the things that somebody maybe in the first century, whatever, or early years, but we have witnessed things. We have seen things, and I think that's what we're telling as an application today.
Yes.
We're talking about lives changed. You know, I commented with another guest that grandfathers especially love to tell stories to their grandchildren.
Oh, yes.
Well, what perfect stories to talk about. And what children really enjoy is stories about mom and dad when they were little children.
Yes.
And so we can tell that. We can share our faith. We can share
absolutely and
things that we've seen.
I like the idea of storytelling and grandparents and grandfathers as storytellers. Mm-hmm. And in telling those stories is where we declare the things that we have, how God has worked in our own lives, the providence of God.
And that's carrying on that legacy, carrying on the traditions and all. So that, beyond the Scriptures, certainly within Scripture, some incredible things, and beyond Scripture, just some things we definitely can do. All right. But I think about Timothy and how his mother and grandmother were responsible in carrying on his faith. We don't know about the grandfather so much in that case, but we certainly know that the grandparent had something to do with that.
Absolutely.
I think you and I talked in an earlier session about, as fathers, we have the incredible responsibility for spiritual growth in our families. That's in Ephesians. We are the spiritual leaders in our family. All the more so as a grandfather, I think. I am still a spiritual leader in the family, or I must be a spiritual leader. So
yes, absolutely.
It's there.
Matter of fact, when you study the family of the Old Testament, the Jewish family, the patriarch probably wasn't defined the way we think of patriarchs today. The patriarch of the family was one that provided spiritual leapership. Mm-hmm. He had a vision for the family, mm-hmm. And it's interesting. I think at that time, a patriarch didn't just have a vision for his children, He had a vision for his children's children, and as you know, in Old Testament terms, hundreds of years, multiple generations. We tend to think of one generation, two generations,
Right.
but patriarchs of the Jewish nation, they thought of their legacy in terms of 1,000 years.
Yes, of generations, yeah. Wow.
Absolutely. A vision for the family. Absolutely.
Okay, good. So if I understand what you're saying, our most important role is a spiritual role of glorifying God, showing God, instilling faith, or helping to instill faith in our children, supporting.
Yes. In fact, creating a legacy of faith is the way I would think of it. Over in Malachi chapter 2, it says, what does your one God desire? We may have talked about that when I was here before. What does your one God desire? It's like a Bible trivia question. And the answer is godly offspring.
Yeah.
God's had this great interest in the transmission of faith from one generation to the next generation.
Yeah.
And yes, grandfathers are part of that transmission, creating a legacy of faith.
And it's a great part of it.
Yes.
One that I've enjoyed. All right. Well, good. So we're talking about hope. And the theme of this particular episode is about instilling that hope. Maybe that's not the best way to put it, of instilling hope, but certainly supporting that hope and helping that hope grow. So let's talk about that. Your thoughts on how we do that as grandfathers.
Yes, your question is one of how. So if you will permit me, let me camp out here just a little bit.
I want your thoughts.
With some ideas. Hey, they say a picture is worth 1,000 words.
Okay.
Can I share a picture of a grandfather that
good.
I think in the words of Brandy, who is a fourth grader, I think you will get a sense of, wow, this grandfather has instilled hope in the life of this granddaughter. Listen to this. Okay. They were nominating men for like Father of the Year, something like that. And so she writes in and she says, the father I want to nominate is my grandfather. If I had to pick a grandfather out of all the grandfathers in the world, I couldn't have picked a better one. Sometimes as a joke, I'll put my stinky socks in his briefcase so at work the next day, he will think of me. He's always at the concerts and plays that I'm in, even though he lives about an hour away. My grandpa makes me feel that I can do anything if I put my mind to it. He makes me feel special and loved. Sometimes I cry in bed thinking about the day he will die, and it makes me feel sad and lonely. Finally, I want to end with one wish, that all kids could have that special fun grandpa time like I do with my grandpa. I'm like, hey, that's Brandy, fourth grader.
Yeah.
But do you get a sense of hope in Brandy, a positive outlook at life?
Hope is a forward-looking type of concept, and she is definitely forward-looking.
Absolutely. So let me see if I can give, in our brief time, some ideas as to how do grandfathers influence. That's really your question. Character and faith are foundational to hope. So how do we think about grandfathers influencing the character and faith of grandchildren? So let me see if I can maybe give 3 or 4 takeaways. To me, grandparents, certainly grandfathers, play a special role. So the first one I would suggest would be grandfathers are positive role models. Let me put it this way. When you're selling a house, what do they say? They say location, location, location. Right? Mm-hmm. Grandfathers as role models, I would say example, example, example.
Okay.
And I got a little saying that I like. I think I can quote it. I'd rather see a sermon than hear one any day.
Yes.
I'd rather you walk with me than merely point the way. Good advice is often confusing, but example is always clear. And I think I may have missed part of that, but hey, it's that idea of example, example, example.
Yeah.
And that's one way that grandfathers influence the lives of grandchildren. Another way I would suggest to you is what I call IRT, individual relationship time. I can't remember when I was here before if we talked about the epidemic of fatherlessness in our society.
I don't remember, but I know it is
We truly have an epidemic of fatherlessness where 50% of all children will experience some part of their childhood in a home where the father is absent.
Yeah.
And so grandfathers, I use the term gap, grandparents as parents. Grandfathers oftentimes have to stand in the gap, not only in the sense of absentee fathers, like a father that's not in the home, but you and I know that that generation works a lot, and sometimes fathers are absent from the home simply because of their demands of their work and such. So I'm saying grandfathers spend time, they fill in the gap. And this idea of individual relationship time, one-on-one time with your grandchildren is really a powerful way that grandfathers influence.
You know that, as you were saying that too, my thoughts went to that relationship time. It's going to be different with a grandfather and a granddaughter and a grandfather and a grandson, but they're both seeing, hopefully, a good role model.
Yes.
But they're interpreting perhaps in different ways. And we talk about how many times the daughter will grow up in a home and the man she marries will resemble the character and such of the father.
Right.
And so that's just another dimension to keep in mind as a grandfather.
Yes, you've heard before someone say less time equals less influence.
Oh, yeah.
And that's true whether you're gardening or building a piece of furniture. Less time is less influence. And so I do think grandfathers play a really important role of standing in the gap sometimes and spending one-on-one time with grandchildren that allows them to be a role model, be an example, and influence in their lives. Another one I like is the idea of a grandfather as a recreational companion. It's like, I tell parents, parenting is teaching your children to find pleasure in the right things. And that's true. God's for fun in the right way. And there's a spiritual dimension to that.
Yeah.
Like, I can enjoy life. Ecclesiastes speaks to that, the enjoyment of life. And God's for fun. He's for fun in the right way, finding pleasure in the right things. Mm-hmm. So grandfathers oftentimes can be recreational companions and show their grandchildren you can enjoy life, you can have fun in life, you can find pleasure in the right things, and there's a spiritual dimension to that. And enjoying life in ways that I would say are in a scope of righteousness and godly holiness. Father. The other one I'd add would be if you are a recreational companion, I encourage grandfathers to be work companions.
Okay.
If you think about the psychological benefits of work, things like, hey, from work I get a sense of capability. I get a sense of initiative. I get a sense of being industrious and productive. And I can take great satisfaction in producing something. Mm-hmm. Well, grandfathers play an important role, I think, in that. Put your grandchildren to work. There are so many psychological benefits to work.
And at the same time, we're passing on knowledge and skills.
Absolutely. That give them confidence in life. I mean, they can embrace hope because they are confident in their own abilities. They have been taught. And so, yes, so much good, I think, comes from work. I say it's the missing link in parenting today.
Okay.
And so I encourage grandparents, grandfathers to, hey, put your grandchildren to work and a little sweat equity, and guess what? It'll bond you together. It'll bond you together with one another.
Yeah.
And then back to Deuteronomy again, where it says, teach these things to your children and your grandchildren. Grandfathers are teachers. And so I encourage grandfathers to think of what I call the pillars of character. And there's information on the web about 6 pillars of character. So what do you teach? You teach caring. I'm going to show my grandchildren how to have a caring heart towards others. You teach responsibility, being responsible about task and making a contribution. Fairness. I teach trustworthiness. Do you mean what you say? Do you say what you mean? I teach respect. It's a pillar of character that you can respect others. You can speak well of others. And I teach citizenship, the idea of being part of a larger community, and how do we give back to our community. And so, as you well know, one of our struggles with parenting sometimes is children have a real strong sense of entitlement, of being consumers. Whereas what we want to instill within our children and grandchildren is to be contributors. And that's true within the community of faith, within the church, that our children not just be consumers, but they actually contribute to the community of faith. And so I think fathers play an important role in teaching these pillars of character.
That's good. Yeah.
Yes.
As you were thinking or talking about that again, I was putting an example for each one of those as you were saying that. So those are good. And goes back to, you got to be there. You got to be a part of it as much as you can.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Less time is less influence. More time is greater influence.
Quality time, and it's rewarding time.
Yeah. Did you notice Brandy in her recommendation of her grandfather says he's at all of my events, even though he lives an hour away.
Yeah.
It's like one of the neat things about being a grandfather is you can be their biggest fan.
Yeah.
Like parents can't do this, but grandparents can. You can give them the big head.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, I have a special love to give my grandchildren. It's okay for me to give them the big head.
Even a very public display of that affection, it's appreciated, it's noticed, and nobody's going to fault you for that.
That's right.
I can cut up with them.
Absolutely.
Okay. We're painting a picture of perhaps an ideal situation, and not everybody's in that ideal situation. I'm physically unable to be with my grandchildren because of distance, living in different parts of our nation, but I still try to have influence with them. And somebody might say, well, I have really messed up my life to where I can't be with that person. But we can start to work to regain that relationship with them, just as you would with any other relationship with them. And I also think that sometimes you could be a surrogate grandfather. I use that as an example because in our congregation here, we have we have families that we have watched them grow up. And now they've fallen in love and married, and now they have children, and we do feel sometimes like a grandparent to some of those children.
Hey, what you just said reminded me of 2 things, if I can remember both of them, that I'd like to share with you. Your first one was the idea that, we may be geographically distant and not have our grandchildren nearby, and there might be some other barriers you alluded to in terms of our influence in their lives. Let me tell you what one grandfather did.
Okay.
He wrote a book. He ended up writing a book called Grandpa Says. And it was a compilation of things that he wrote to his grandchildren when they were off at college. And so they would be these words of wisdom. One week he might be writing about honesty, and he would send his grandchildren off at college this letter from Grandpa about honesty. He would say something like, honesty is not the best policy. It's the only policy. And he would have quotes and things like that about honesty, and he would put it in an envelope, and it was marked with Grandpa Says up in the corner. And guess what his grandchildren said? Said when it came in the mail, their roommates would see the envelope, Grandpa Says, and would open it before the grandchildren would get the mail. They were so interested in seeing what their grandfather had to say. And so there's a good example of a grandfather who was influencing his grandchildren even though he was geographically distant. And he took all those letters at some point and he compiled them in a book called Grandpa Says. Okay. It's a really neat writing.
You reminded me of something. When I was a young staff sergeant in the Air Force, I had the opportunity, I'll say it that way, to be stationed on a remote assignment. Mm-hmm. And we had our four daughters were very young at the time. Well, they could not go with me. Lynn and the daughter stayed here in the United States. I would read and record reading a children's book and send it to the children. And then Lynn would put in the cassette and listen. The girls would listen. So there are things we can do if we're geographically separate, and the girls remember that, by the way.
Sure.
So
think out of the box a bit. Yeah. The other thing you alluded to a moment ago was the idea of being a surrogate grandfather or grandparent. I remember Dean Martin and Jerry Lewis. Okay. You remember their relationship, and I believe it was Jerry Lewis who was talking about his relationship with Dean Martin after Dean Martin had passed away. And Jerry Lewis said, he was my brother by choice.
Okay.
And that has always stuck with me, that you can be a brother by choice. You can be a grandparent by choice. Mm-hmm. And so you look around you at children here in your congregation or in the community and your neighborhood, and there's probably some children that you could be a grandfather by choice. Yeah. And I really like that idea.
I do too. I have never heard that. I like that. Yes. Grandfather by choice. I think that's a good
and
description.
Isn't it does kind of make you think in terms of the community of faith where God put us in this family, and you be family to one another.
Yeah, that's good stuff, Steve.
It is, I think. Grandfather by choice.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I know you've got some other notes to share with us on this.
Well, I guess I would maybe conclude with suggesting that one of the things grandfathers can do to instill hope is be a prayer warrior for your grandchildren. I like to say once every day and twice on their birthday.
And by the way, that's yet another way of transferring our faith. Yes. Helping that child build faith through, they know granddad is a prayer person.
Yes. Wow. Okay. As far as leading family in prayer. Now, I thought I'd conclude maybe with sharing with you what I call a grandparent's prayer. How about that?
Yes.
I like this. Oh, Heavenly Father, make me a better grandparent. Teach me to understand my grandchildren, to listen patiently to what they have to say, and to answer all their questions kindly. Make me as attentive to them as I would have them be to me. Forbid that I should be indifferent in the face of their mistakes. May I always be mindful of the importance of my influence on their lives. Guide me day by day that I may demonstrate by all I say and do that faith produces eternal hope. Character is demonstrated in righteousness, and honesty brings happiness. Reduce, I pray, the crankiness in me. And when I am out of sorts, help me, O Lord, help me to hold my tongue. May I ever be mindful that my grandchildren are children, and I should not expect of them the judgment of adults. Let me not rob them of the opportunity to earn their own way and to learn to do for themselves. Bless me with the bigness to grant them all their reasonable requests and the courage to deny them privileges that will do them harm. Make me fair and just and kind, and fit me, O Lord, to be loved and respected and imitated by my grandchildren.
Yeah, wow.
Isn't that good?
There's a lot of humility in that prayer. That the author of that, excuse me, the author of that prayer is acknowledging a lack of perfection.
Yeah.
Of yes, I make mistakes and I'm human and get out of sorts. And so, yeah, that's a good prayer. I'm going to put a link to that in the show notes that somebody can have that. I think that's a good reminder.
And of course, you know where prayers go, they always go on the refrigerator.
Oh, okay.
Right.
Okay. All right. Well, we used the term legacy earlier in our discussion. So again, what legacy do you want to leave to your grandchildren?
Yes, and I think we probably have answered that question. It actually goes back to our first question, like what is your most important role?
Yeah.
And as a reminder for our audience, your most important role is the transmission of faith from one generation to the next. And that's what you want your legacy to be. That's what God wants your legacy
and
to
I
be.
kind of go back to one of the other things I said a few moments ago. If I have stumbled and fallen and I've not lived up to my role as a grandfather, maybe I haven't had the chance, I don't know. But I rebuild my relationship with the Lord, and then I can rebuild my relationship with the child. Like that prayer, I can admit my mistakes and I can look forward to rebuilding. And I think a child will see that and will acknowledge the honest effort that a grandparent is making.
I think so. If you think back to what we were saying about example,
Yeah.
probably most of us could maybe look at our lives and identify moments when, yes, I wasn't the best of example, but it also illustrates that what we said earlier about what had they seen. They had seen a God of forgiveness. They had seen a God of deliverance. They had witnessed a God of transformation. So as grandfathers, where, yes, we have some of those regrets, perhaps, we can use them as in teachable moments to teach our grandchildren the God of grace and the God of forgiveness.
Yeah. It won't happen immediately sometimes. It may take patience and time, but we've got to make the effort.
Absolutely.
And got to get started. If we don't get started, when are you going to get started?
That's right.
Get started. Okay. Steve, thank you. You have, as usual, a wealth of information and good advice. I think our listeners will appreciate it very much.
Well, thank you for having me.
All right. Thank you, my brother.
Well, friends, this concludes the third episode in how grandfathers help instill hope in their grandchildren. I invite you to continue listening. We have one more episode in this series.